Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 162. And my guest in this episode is Alina Wilson, and I would identify Alina as an accomplished and dynamic business owner and professional. We will talk to that in this conversation. She is the owner of Bridgeport Laser and Wellness Center out in Oregon, and she is also an author, and we will be honing in on that as well in this conversation. And the book that she wrote is called Thoughtful Aging, Restoring Honor to the Aging Process. And you could think of thoughtful aging as being in contrast to the fighting of aging, or the war we wage against aging, and I guess they call it anti-aging. And so somebody who's aging themselves, I found this to be insightful, and I appreciate her thoughtfulness in thoughtful aging. So we'll discuss that. I was glad to have Alina as a guest, and I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do as well, and thank you all so much for being here. And I'd like to welcome Alina Wilson to the IdeaCast interview series. As with, I'd say, almost all of my guests, I have a pre-meet and we talk, and a lot of times we're like, we should have hit record, because they are usually good conversations, and ours was certainly the case as well. And I want to draw some inspiration from that and some other conversations that I've listened to that you've had, and I think we're going to have a nice conversation. So welcome, Alina. I'm glad to have you here with me tonight.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. And to the YouTube audience and the Spotify audience, I welcome you all as well, especially my subscribers. I always want to offer my gratitude to you, because it's nice to know that people are supporting you in that kind of subtle but meaningful way, and I appreciate that. So what I'd like to do, Alina, is for my sake, but also for the audience sake, more importantly, I think, is let's find out about you. Let's have you share some background as you think it would relate to the conversation that we're going to have afterwards. So if you want to let us know, who is Alina and where is she coming from and what is she up to?
I would be happy to. So I am a 19 plus year aesthetics and wellness clinic owner. And what that means is that I work in the landscape of beauty and wellness. So think of everything pretty much related to skincare, hormones, weight loss, different therapies, except surgery. We don't do surgery here. So that's the one thing that I don't do. I leave that to the experts. And under this umbrella, I've had the opportunity to have thousands of conversations with women over the years of varying age groups, from teens and 20s, developing into young adults, young women, and then women in their 60s, 70s, 80s who are facing aging issues in a society that's been built around the message that anti-aging is achievable and that some kind of de facto period of decline, which is not true. And so that really catapulted me into this mission of how do we shift this narrative from anti-aging to what I refer to under this umbrella at my clinic here as thoughtful aging. Mm-hmm. Because aging isn't about losing something, it's about gaining depth, in my experience.
And to reveal to the audience, you have recently published a book called Thoughtful Aging, I believe.
Oh, yes. I put all of those thoughts and ideas into a book.
Okay. Yeah. Has this is the 17th of February 26th. Has it been has it hit the streets yet, or dropped, as the young people would say, or is it forthcoming?
It is ready and available on all major platforms. You can find it on Amazon. The title of the book is called Thoughtful Aging, and the message of the book is really about restoring honor to the aging process. Mm-hmm. And I lead readers through the promise that if they stick with me throughout the message of the book, then by the end of the book, they will be able to look in the mirror and love who they see just as they are.
Okay. That's wonderful, and quite a gift for someone who is, in that space and struggling with and we'll unpack a lot of this in this conversation about what's going on in society at large, and perceptions on aging, especially as it relates to women, although I think men fall into some of this as well. Now, you also you mentioned you have your clinic or your facility, and that's Bridgeport, right? And you've been 19 years with Bridgeport. You were in your location, or am I fuzzy there?
I've been doing this for 19 years. It
19
started
years.
back in 2007. It wasn't always under this name.
Okay.
I am single now, but I was formerly married to a family practice doctor, and he was doing conventional medicine. This was way back in 2005, 2006. And he saw the broken system that he was working in and was frustrated. And he said, I really want to do something different. And so he said, I want to do a cash pay practice. And I jumped in and I said, well, I can make that happen. Let's do that. And we did that together. He was part-time. I was full-time. And he continued working in medicine, emergency medicine, for a number of years, and then just did this skincare practice part-time. He left the practice in 2021. And at that point, I had a decision to make. Do I want to keep going on my own, or do I want to pack it all up and move on? And I made the decision for a number of reasons to keep going. Number one, I love what I do. I love my staff. And it's such a dynamic industry. It's ever changing, and it's a world of healing. And being able to have that contact with both men and women on a daily basis is something that sparks my joy and sparks my passion. And so I continued it on without him.
And how wonderful that, as you just said, there is that passion that's coming out, and that you can channel that passion into a business or a practice, and that's really wonderful, because that's such a great relationship with your clients and people who come to see you. Vis-a-vis being on some kind of assembly line and disconnected, and people who are just passionate about their job, that you bring that, and I think that really makes especially something sensitive as this too. Now, I would like to just jump right in head first, and I'll confess, in our pre-meet, this went right over my head when we were talking. But in a conversation that I listened to that you had with another show, you are talking about thoughtful aging versus perhaps anti-aging. And I don't say like a hard like wrestling match versus, but there is distinction there. And I want to unpack that distinction because, again, my ignorant sort of just, blowing past me when I first heard anti-aging was that it really is sort of running counter to this idea that you're proposing, that there's this thoughtful aging process, and more like this is, and I'll ask you to appropriately define this, but to me now I'm sort of catching on and interpreting is that this is more of a battle to be won, or something to be defeated, or something that's wrong with you that needs to be fixed, or so I'll throw that on the table, and I'll have you just correct me or tidy me up a little bit. But in asking this question about anti-aging, I will also maybe open it up a little bit, and genuinely curious to know what are they doing in the anti-aging industry, and is it both aesthetics and physicality, or is it also like the longevity people, where they are working with biology, they're working with system restoration, and all the reversing of aging and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot to throw at you in one question, but I wanted to be articulate about it because this is kind of the crux, I think, of what distinguishes you as a practitioner. So I'll hush and let you respond to that and see where you want to go with that.
So one word that you said that really caught my attention was the word fix. Mm-hmm. And when women and people come in here, they come in here with the idea that there is something that they need to fix, that there's a mm-hmm. problem that they have. That belief system, I believe, was born out of a cultural narrative that was designed around e-commerce, meaning anti-aging. The ads and the radio programs and the magazine articles that are all designed to capture our attention and make us think that there is something wrong with aging, that we need to fight against it. That it's inherent in the word itself, anti. I think that when women come in here feeling like they have something to fix, they're never going to be happy or satisfied.
Okay.
And therein lies the issue. Can we shift perspective from viewing aging as a deficit to viewing aging as a gift that honors wisdom, a gift that honors experience and depth? And one of the chapters that I've heard is most meaningful in my book is when I challenge readers. When they look in the mirror, they wake up one morning and they see a new wrinkle or a new line. Do they immediately automatically think, I need to get that fixed? Or, uh-oh, here we go again. Or I got to run to my doctor and erase that. Or can they stop and step back for a minute and really contemplate where that came from? What does that represent? Maybe you have spent a season of life helping a child through a divorce, or you're taking care of your grandchildren, or you've had a major life transition or a job change. All of these experiences that we have in life, they show on us. And I'm not at all saying that those appearance-related changes shouldn't be addressed if a person wants to. What I'm saying is let's address them from a place of want rather than a place of need. And that's really the message inherent in thoughtful aging. Thoughtful aging is so much more about character development and flow, and so much less about the fight against aging. Now, the American Academy of Anti-Aging sounds very official, right?
Yeah.
It's not a thing.
Yeah.
It was a few guys who had this idea to create this thing that they could get doctors to join and subscribe to so that doctors could have another plaque to put on their wall. There's no medicine, no course that they have to go through. I could go, well, I can't because I'm not a doctor, but you can go if you're a licensed medical provider and pay, I think it's probably up to $8.95 now, and get this certificate from the American Academy of Anti-Aging. Now, that's not to say that they don't publish good articles and that they don't have training courses available, but there really isn't a study, board certified credentialing for anti-aging. It sounds official, so I think that in and of itself is very misleading. It's a business. Anti-aging is a business. It's a business across all platforms, whether you're talking about the billion-dollar cosmetic industry that just keeps growing and growing, where we see ads of Martha Stewart from companies wanting to be age appropriate, but yet she's promoting youth-based products and she's been airbrushed. So
Right.
there's a lot of subconscious messaging that goes into us on a day-to-day basis, especially now with, I'm going to say social media. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because we all know about it, but it's out there to get our attention and it's working. So what can we do then to really step back into a place of alignment and to find a way to be an example to our daughters and our granddaughters and this younger generation that is fighting so many more battles than we are when it comes to comparison and insecurity and lack of self-worth. I was talking to a 20-year-old the other day, and we were talking about friendships and when friendships and she was explaining to me her experience trial. And I said to her, when I was in high school and a young adult, when a friendship ended, it just ended. And there was this disconnect and there was this sadness. But in her world at age 20 plus, the friendship doesn't just end because now they all have location share. She became obsessed with knowing where everybody was and what was she being left out of. And the pressure to follow them and all of their activities on social media, and then her getting cyberbullied by them, it just became this whole really murky, messy thing that she has to deal with. And I didn't have that experience. So we've got this younger group of kids and young adults coming up, and they're going to be aging. It's undeniable. What can we as middle-aged women and men do that sets an example for them on how to age through depth of character rather than chasing unattainable ideals?
Yeah. And this was something I wanted to ask you, so I'm glad we're here. So I would maybe let's set up a hypothetical scenario. If a 28-year-old woman or man or anyone in between came to you and said, I'm worried about what's on the horizon. Of course they're 28, so that, you and I would say, oh, you're so young. But in their minds and in where they may be, there may be a looming crisis of identity or security or something going on with perhaps their perception of aging people around them. So in other words, these fears are starting to come up. And I like the idea of people sort of being prepared and mentally rehearsing proactive steps for gracefully moving through each phase of life, each stage of maturity. So what would you say to this hypothetical 28-year-old that's getting a little, antsy or anxious about the fact that 10 years, they'll be 38, and 20, they'll be 48. And then, 48's kind of, that could be a place where some people will start to feel that midlife thing kick in. So, or even 38, I don't know. But anyway, I'll stop and see what you think about that 28-year-old, and what would you say to them in that compassionate stance that you take?
I would applaud them. Oh my goodness, you're aware of this process that's going to be happening. What is most important to you? What is it within your circle, whether it's aging grandparents or aging parents, or seeing maybe you've had a family member with a health issue or a struggle, and so you're seeing it on the periphery, but you're imagining it happening to you. That can create a lot of insecurity. There is a new field of medicine emerging, and it is somewhat aligned with anti-aging, but it's different. And so, just kind of touching on your previous question, I think anti-aging in and of itself is antiquated, and it's becoming replaced with this idea of longevity medicine. Okay. So we don't want to fight against aging. We want to understand it in a way that allows us to harness the potential that science is presenting to us in this day and age. So I would say to that 28-year-old, have you had a full lab panel done? Do you know what your hormones are right now at age 28? Because this is valuable information. This is something that you can refer back to when you're 35 or 38 or 48 to know when you were feeling your best. What were your hormones like? What was your progesterone, your testosterone, your estrogen? And do you have thyroid dysfunction? Are you okay? There's something psychologically reassuring about knowing what's going inside of you from a cellular standpoint. And lab values are really the closest look that we can take at what's going on at any given marker. And I tell people to do this at every decade. 28, 38, 48, 58, every decade at the very most. If not every 5 years, every 10 years. Yeah.
At my age, my doctor has me doing panels like every 6 months or a year, and stuff like that. And, which I love. I love having that vigilance, and some of it is metabolic, but some of it is also, background things. Like I did have cancer years ago, and I want to make sure that doesn't rear itself up. And, it was very, trivial in my opinion, what I had, but it was also could have been life-threatening. So I was lucky, very, very lucky. But I appreciate the fact that there is that vigilance. Now I'm speaking to something distinct from what you just said, but if I could put an emphasis on what you said in a kind of oblique way, that yes, these are important things to stay on top of, I think, especially once you're north of 30 years old, and then you can have a history that your physician can trace, and little lines on graphs that we can appreciate as we move through our stages. One thing to go back, and I hope this isn't too much of a tangent, but the 20-year-old you spoke to, who had the issue with severing ties and walking away, I was ruminating on that momentarily, and I thought, this is a great opportunity, a moment that in a world full of influencers and a world full of coaches where everyone's a coach and an influencer, especially online, and we won't say the SM word in its full, but in that domain, that there aren't people in supportive roles who are talking about gray, and there are, I shouldn't say this black and white, but there are, I would love to see that kind of supportive behavior where you're teaching and demonstrating how you can gray rock, how you can, alter your avatar self in that ecology and insulate yourself, and then learn the art of severance and learn the art, like you said, when we were young, something happened. That's it. Even if you live in a small town, there's ways to not run into people. You don't go to that bar. You don't do this. You don't do that. So anyway, I just had this moment. So if anybody's listening out there and you do that kind of thing, I think that would be beautiful. What a gift to give to your peers, and your generation, to encourage people. So I'm sorry, tangent, but what you said, has so much potential, what that young lady was experiencing.
It's one of the reasons that I started my podcast, The Becoming Years, to create these intergenerational conversations and these discussions that shape how we live. Mm-hmm. Because I am so privileged to be able to sit here and I can talk to 20-year-olds and I can talk to 60-year-olds, and there are through lines that we carry as women that go along each decade, and it's pretty consistent, the way that we develop through different transitional stages in life, and the things that she's going through now, the self-worth and the loss of her social group and the restructuring, rewriting her own story. Guess what? I'm doing that at 50. Guess what? I just got off the phone last week with another woman who's finding herself single at age 68. She's doing it too. We're all doing it. We're just not talking about it. Okay.
So you can have that networking capacity actualized or realized, that there's this web of communication that can be set up for support or for, intercession or helping someone move themselves out of something, whether it's a mental space or a physical space. I just love that. And I'm glad that your podcast is doing that. And, something that came to mind when you said you're going cross-generational is, the idea, and it's a fancy word, it's called filial piety. And it is kind of more oriented towards young people having respect for their elders. But when we see in communal cultures, and I'll target Japan for an instance, and people who know Japanese culture can correct me in the comments, but what I understand is that there is historically a filial piety where the younger people collaborate, integrate, and have reciprocal relations with the elders, and they learn from them, and the elders are in turn influenced and affected by the younger people because that youthful energy. So there's this beautiful exchange. And I've seen it go so far as, because the only TV channel I had for years was NHK, which was Japanese English language television. And they had this beautiful center in, I don't know if it was in Kyoto or somewhere, but it was an elder care center and a daycare center integrated. And, what a great idea. You've got people in their 70s and 80s with 5-year-olds. And just how they support and nurture each other and the reverberance that comes from that. So again, I'm a tangential person, but just that idea of what you're doing and what you're reaching across through the years and the generations to have this, again, reciprocal or integrative, collaboration. That's beautiful.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because my mom, who I care for sometimes, she was just with me, about a week and a half ago for a couple of weeks. I found a place near my office here in Oregon where it has that exact same model. So it has 0 to 5 childcare on one side, and then on the other side is where the seniors who are having memory issues go, and they are taken care of, and then they integrate with the little ones, and the little ones come over and I get to hold them and play with them and dance with them and do arts and crafts with them. And I felt so blessed to be able to find this place, because my mother is one of those women who grew up in the 50s, very idealistic. She spent her whole life raising children, and that was her identity for so long. And now that she's 82 years old and somewhat regressing, it is the thing that brings her the most joy.
Wow. Wow. And you talk about thoughtful aging, that when the mind can be activated in that way and stimulated in that way, and all that neurogenerative activity that goes on with novelty and things like that, or again, like you said, sort of retro feeling, what you were, driven, or I shouldn't say driven to do, but what you did as your life, as your identity, as you said. Wow, that's so cool. And obviously you have to have a few little safeguards installed, but to be able to do that, I think is model. I think that would be really neat to see that spread and give meaning and purpose to persons who are in those autumn years, and then also because I can remember, when I was a kid and under 6 years of age, old people fascinated the hell out of me. They were born in the 19th century back then. They were like born in the 1890s or, like right around the turn of the century. So they saw everything, and they would tell me stories, and I'd sit there, and just wick it all up and wow, what a gift, So, I'm sorry, more tangents, but just beautiful to have a child just awestruck by, stories of, the 1920s or, and so anyway, that's so neat to have that connection. And it really does connect us, doesn't it? It binds us to, our not familial lineage, but just our cultural lineage. And it could be any culture, but just, that we're connected historically that way. And I'll tell stories like I just did about knowing people who were, in their 70s and 80s back in the early to mid 70s. And they, were born at that time, and they saw people were born in the middle of the 19th century. So it's just that, I don't know, I'm babbling, but that continuity, it's just so beautiful.
I understand what you're saying. And I was the same way growing up. There was older people in my neighborhood growing up, and I would much rather spend an afternoon hanging out on the porch with them than I would doing anything else, pretty much. They just fascinated me.
Good.
I had somebody ask me, this was a couple of years ago, why do you like old people? Why do you really like old people? And it caught me off guard. And so I went to an older friend that I have who's 90 years old now. And I posed that question to her. I said, I was asked this question. What do you think about that? And she looked at me and she said, well, I don't know who they're talking about, but I'm not old. I'm experienced. And
there you go.
Isn't that the best? Okay. Perspective is everything. And it affects how we age. The way that we view ourselves and our circumstance affects how we age.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring thoughtful aging to life in a book form, because I think that there are very specific things that you can do to age well from a place of choice, rather than always being the one that the doctor says, I'm sorry, well, you're no spring chicken, or you're just getting older. And I had doctors telling me that at 35 when I knew there was something wrong with me, and nobody would figure it out. And I solved the problem myself. It took me 5 years, but I figured it out.
Okay.
But I also didn't give up. I just kept searching. So with my life experience and that of those that I've had the opportunity to talk to, there are 5 things that I think that people can really do to embrace aging in a healthy way. And the first one is cultivating a growth mindset. You have to want to learn something different. You have to want to grow in new ways if you're going to create change in your life. And so once you do that, once you embrace a growth mindset, practice curiosity. Get curious about why you do the things that you do. What is it that you like about your life? What do you not like? Ask yourself those questions and start getting curious to break the cycles and how we have in our negative thoughts as well as our positive thoughts, and really start to crack the lid on that and let some light in. Sometimes that can lead you to darker places, though, where you're all of a sudden examining choices that you wish you hadn't made or things that you wish you hadn't said. And so in that, we really need to practice self-compassion and acceptance and meet ourselves where we are in that space, in that time. Give ourselves grace for where we've been, and then just set action going forward. And then the last 2 things that I always encourage people to do is stay mindful and grounded as you're going through this process, and then be proactive and responsible. And that's really important in the world of healthcare and aging and medicine. We talked about lab values just a minute ago, and it's important for people to understand that those lab values are pretty much always going to be normal or within normal range, because they're based on lab values from someone as young as 18 and someone as old as 80. So as long as you fall within that range, you're either high normal, low normal, or you're just normal. But that doesn't mean it's right. If you feel like there's something wrong, just because a piece of paper tells you that you're normal, you don't have to, that doesn't have to be the end all be all. You can keep asking questions and be proactive for your own health.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we'll let that set for a second. People absorb that. I'm trying to think of the next question I want to ask you. In fact, I have one thought to share with you that it's an anecdote that might be kind of cute. And when I first moved to Florida, I was 21 years old, and this was back in the early 90s, like 90, 91. And I went to the town that I live in, their little meeting place, or it's not City Hall, but it's like they're not quite a convention center, but whatever that is, their rec center or whatever. They were hosting dance lessons from some club that was doing dance lessons. I went at 21 years of age. There were about 9 to 11 women in their late 70s or early 80s. So they were born in the teens or the early 20s. I had so much fun that night because I was the only guy there, right? And every one of these gals was like, I'm going to teach you the Lindy, or I'm going to teach you the Foxtrot, so I'm getting out there like jamming with these gals, but they were teaching me their thing and like you said with your mom, like being the mom, they were being the 20 something, and inhabiting that role just for that night. So I was so glad I went, because it just was an intuitive move. I thought, well, I'll go just because it's, a social thing and I'll get out of the house, but I'll take that to my grave, just knowing that was such a beautiful exchange. Like, I'm sure their night was made by having this young dude show up and wanted to learn. I mean, I was sincere. I like, show me how you do Charleston or whatever the hell we did that night. So anyway, I thought I'd share that one because that's intergenerational, and it is, like you said, it is injecting, some, like your 5 steps. It's injecting some novelty and some difference in your, environment, right? And that they were able to, otherwise they would have stood there and talked to each other all night and probably been bored. But this one guy showed up, and I'm not trying to pat myself up for that. It's just that happened to work out. So anyway, but that was such a fun night. I can remember that.
What a fun memory. And
yeah,
what I love about that is your courage to step out and try something new.
Yeah. I was wild and reckless at 21, and this was a nice wild and reckless. I'm like, I'm going to learn the Lindsay, and like
I
said, I was
now, though. That's the question.
Oh,
Can you do it now?
No, long forgotten. In fact, my mother made me take Irish step dancing when I was a kid, which was kind of traumatic. You had to wear a kilt and things like that. So I kind of like, but I stuck with it for a couple of years. I won a bunch of little trophies and medals and, and regional stuff. And, but developed my leg muscles, and, I had legs like a billy goat. So from just doing the thing that they do. Now, I don't remember, like, I buried that, like I couldn't do I see it when people on like TV or whatever, and the young Irish step dancers doing their little thing. I see the steps and I'm like, oh, that's a hornpipe or a reel or a jig. And so there's some part of, up in the brain there that remembers that. But, anyway, I don't regret it. I don't, look, on my mother, any kind of judgment for that, because it was good. It helped, and, helped me physically develop as a child and do that. But anywho, enough of my stories. Let's get back to you. Sorry.
I like your stories.
I just want to, I want to share them with you because I think they relate to what you're talking about and what you're doing and what your heart is, your heart-driven work. So there's another really big thing that I want to check in with you that super resonated with me when I listened to your other conversation. And that is that you struck on something that appeals to me about the doing versus the being. And I have another guy that I interviewed, and he has like having mode and being mode, and I kind of integrated those two. And it's like having mode is all the things we do to feed ourselves and have stuff, but the being mode is more like, bodhisattva, where you're in your silence, and there's very little outward expression, but you're just being with yourself. So talk to me about doing and being, because I want to hear your interpretation of that, or your view on that, because I think that's a really important step. Oh, yeah. There's my producer back there checking.
Your producer.
Yeah, my producer.
Life asks so much of us, just from a day-to-day standpoint, in the relationships that we cultivate, in the with maybe your parenting, the work, the jobs, the coworkers, the navigation that we do, and all the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. And I know from my own personal experience, I spent decades in survival mode, because doing was where I found the most consistency and the most solid footing. If I had that confidence of, well, I can do it, or I'm just going to do that, that the doing, looking toward the next thing that needed to be done, gave me a purpose for a long time,
Okay.
It filled my time. It allowed me to remain invisible in my relationships, because my relationships were built around what I was bringing to the relationships. And of course, as a parent or in a marriage, you got to make the dinners and load the dishwasher and do the laundry and all of those things. But there's such a tendency, I can only speak for the women that I've spoken to get lost in all of that. And you do wake up at some point, whether it's through a forced transition or one of choice, and you find yourself wondering, where am I in all of this?
Your volume?
Oh,
I'm going to hit pause.
Okay.
Your volume stop, or your sound stop. Hold on one sec. Okay, apologies to the audience. My Bluetooth did something wonky. So, Alina, I apologize. Back to you.
Back to the thought at hand.
Yeah, and being.
Back to doing versus being. Yes. So, women across all generations, they wake up at some point and they find themselves wondering, where are they in they've become lost in all of the doing. And there's this conscious choice that we make that draws us back into being. And when I say being, what I mean is that we do start asking ourselves those questions. Well, why am I doing what I'm doing? Do I want to do what I'm doing? Are there transitions or life changes that I want to make that will help me feel more complete and more whole as a woman in whatever transition it is? The beautiful thing about that is those questions ultimately will lead us back to our own true source of beauty, which is that internal compass. And that there's a little place in all of us that's never been injured, never been harmed. And once we get grounded in that space again, then we have the confidence to bring our full selves to the world around us and live through a state of being where our self-worth isn't outsourced, where we don't need external validation, where we can wake up and do the things that we do because we want to, not because we need to. Again, going back to doing versus being. When you're in that place of being, then you see things more clearly in life. You can navigate stressful situations, ups and downs, relationships a lot more comfortably and easily because you have the confidence to present your full self to those around you who you love and who love you.
I'm glad you mentioned something in that was a question that I had written down, and that was like not so it's like reclaiming your autonomy and not necessarily having it externally available or externally like you're desiring it to be something that's not integral to yourself, and so I think I'll just reiterate what you said, because I think that was, like I said, it was on my list of things to cover with you. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important, for
I do. A lot of
so
times
many
I'll go
layers.
out to dinner by myself. Oh, sorry.
No. I was just going to say there's layers to that, but yeah.
100% there is, because if it were as easy as thinking logically, then no problem. We are great problem solvers. We would sail right through this, but it's not as easy as thinking your way logically out of an emotional state of being. And so learning to be in an emotion and not become the emotion is a highly valuable skill, because it allows you a deeper sense of empathy for others and for yourself. I was going to share with you that a lot of times I'll make myself go out to dinner by myself. I'm single, but I have a lot of friends, so I don't usually eat alone. But
Right.
I'll make myself go out to dinner by myself because it makes me highly uncomfortable. And
Oh,
I
okay.
want to feel uncomfortable. I want to know that I'm okay doing things on my own. I don't have to fill my time all the time with activities with others. And it really helps me to think about it this way. I'm not in those situations and others. I'm not by myself. I'm with myself. And I really like that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And forgive me another tangent, but did you ever see the Steve Martin film called Lonely Guy? Do you recall that one?
No.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
it's not a comedy. It's actually kind of a dramedy, and it's downbeat, right? So if anybody watches it, I'll caveat that it's not a ha 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 Steve Martin film, but there was a funny scene in there. So I think he goes through this. It's been forever since I've seen it, but he goes through his routine. He's single. He finds himself single, like maybe a relationship dissolved, and there was a scene where he took himself out to dinner. And it was at a, respectable restaurant, nice, fancy place. And he walks up to the podium where the seater greeter maitre d' person was. And, the maitre d' looks up and, how many in your party, sir? And Steve Martin leans over and he goes, just one. And all of a sudden, like the record across the vinyl, the maitre d' like pulls the microphone forward and goes, table for one, or something really crazy dramatic. And then they dramatically lead him into the middle of this dining room, into this little small table. And there's like a spotlight on him, right? It's just all these nightmares, like you're
That's
having a fever dream.
hilarious.
So then he sits down, he's like beside himself, like just like, oh Christ, this is a nightmare. So then all of a sudden, like the wait staff, the busboy or whatever, approach him, and he gets this flash, and he's like, aha. And so he pulls out a little notepad and a pen, and they're like, just subtly implying something. And, the waiter catches it, and the waiter's like, oh crap, we got a food critic, And so all of a sudden he's the hero, and it's like everybody's leaning on his reactions to the food, and the staff are just like on, eggshells. It's kind of a funny movie. It's not the empowerment that you're talking about, but he's taking some moment of vulnerability and almost crisis, like he's like devastated that he's out there, being exposed, instead of just having a nice meal where everybody leaves him alone. And he flips it, and he comes away with this whole shtick about a food critic. Anyway, it was
That's
cute.
hilarious.
Yeah,
That's brilliant writing. I like
only
that.
Steve Martin could pull it off too. It was
Right.
cute. It was cute. It's probably on YouTube as a scene if anybody wants to access it. But but otherwise it's a very downbeat movie. So be in a good mood when you start watching it. But I love that to get back to reality for a second, I love that you can do that. And I think, because I had long periods of being single myself, or not having like significant or serious relationships. And to be able to take yourself out. I'd go out to clubs. This was back in the early 90s when raves and all that. I'd go out to the oops, oops, music, and just, get out there in the crowd and have fun. I didn't know anybody. And I'm just like, and to be able to do that for yourself and by yourself is, by yourself is in the act of taking yourself out, not like all by myself, is just, it's a test. It's a test. And but when you come out, that you can go home and feel good about yourself and feel like you had a good evening. And this wasn't some, test in stoicism or, resilience or anything like it. It was just a beautiful evening, and you were able to, be with yourself as you pointed out. So anyway, sorry for the yet another tangent.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's never once been comfortable, but what I do now is I've made a routine out of it.
Okay.
I stop and I pick up a newspaper because I do enjoy reading newspapers, but I don't have the time. And so I've made it more like just a thing that I actually look forward to doing now, where I'll get a newspaper, I'll go, get a glass of wine, have a nice steak or whatever it is that I feel like eating that night. And I legitimately am by myself with myself. And it's still uncomfortable, but there is comfort in it, in that I know I'm okay. I'm good.
I have a friend. I don't have very many friends, but I have a friend, and she's single and by choice, and she has no interest in getting involved with anybody. She has a very good, she lives here in Florida, and she has a very, she calls him her best friend. He lives in San Francisco. They get together once in a while, but strictly platonically, and they love each other as buddies and friends. But I find her to be an interesting person in that sense that she has this autonomy and independence, and she's not following some cultural narrative that she has to be, in something or attached, and as she said to me, she goes, I can go surfing anytime I want. I can take off and go out of town. And in fact, we watch her cats when she goes out of town. She can do whatever she wants. And there's something to that. But I find her in a way inspirational that this does not negatively affect her in any way. And I've known her for almost 3 years, and I would think there would be some little cracks or signs or anything that if she's just putting on a brave face and that she would really, prefer to be in a relationship. But I don't think that's the case. And I think that's interesting, that's her deal. And I, it's like, oh, cool. So anyway,
there are a lot of women like that. I know a lot of women like that. And those relationships take a lot of effort and energy.
Yep.
And I think for a lot of women, they just get to the point where they don't want to put their effort and their energy. It's about energy management. They don't want to put it there. If something were to happen, great, but they're not out looking for it. They're not out pining for it. They've found their way back to their own center and their own place of beauty where they're good with it and they're good without it. If it's there, it's there. And if it's not, it's not.
Yeah. And I've seen this intergenerationally because she fits a demo that I've recognized from women like my parents' generation, my generation. She's highly intelligent and has a very good job. So there's none of this kind of, there may be an affective or an emotional potential there that some people would say, well, you got a good job and you're intelligent, but don't you feel lonely or anything? And I don't think that's a factor for her, but she's independent and brilliant and so doesn't, require a completion by way of the other, another. So, and again, I could be, misreading this person. And so I'll say it very gingerly, but I think just my read in 3 years is that, again, and I've known women my mother's age who, again, were very intelligent and very successful. And they're like you said, I want to do other things, and like you said, if something happens, that's great. If, whatever, but they're fine. And
you okay. See that changing is when they hit their 80s. The women, the friend group that I have, men and women that I know that are in their 80s and 90s, they're like freaking teenagers. Like they are so funny. They are hilarious, but they're out there and they do then at that point, they want that partnership and that companionship and that, and to be loved and to love someone as the years are winding down. Those sparks get reignited from what I've seen and experienced in my older friend groups. And it becomes almost a singular focus, wanting to finish life with someone in a beautiful way. And that's, what it is right now. And I think that's one really important thing to remember about transition is what it is right now isn't how it might always be. I wasn't at age 25. I wasn't the same person that I was at 45. And now I'm 54, definitely a different person at 54 as well. And that's why I always look forward to aging, because I know that another year and another year and another year will bring me closer to a better version of myself. If what we seek is what we see, I'm just going to keep it positive and just keep looking.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that, Alina, because I think that's going to resonate with, or even open eyes, in the audience. Now, I have a hard stop in a few minutes, but what I do want to do is ask you to bring up one more thing that I pulled out of my research on you. and that is having care teams. And you just spoke to that a moment ago with your group. And I don't know if it's a care team, but I would, infer at this moment that it is. And so can we talk about care teams for people in the audience rather, and the value of that?
Yes, this is really, really important. So going back full circle to anti-aging, we're throwing that out the door. Longevity medicine is a new way of aging under that umbrella. And I talk about this in my book too. It's really important to create a care team of providers that can work with you, not just for you. So our traditional medical model is a broken system. It's where you go to the doctor and they tell you this is what's wrong, or they tell you nothing's wrong, and then you go home. We have so many more options now. We can ask to have our doctors, whether it's a medical doctor, an acupuncturist, a naturopath, a chiropractor, we can ask to have them all communicate together for our own benefit so that we can age in a way that leaves us feeling empowered rather than victimized. Unfortunately, doctors aren't always, Western medical doctors, I'll just kind of, because we're running out of time, leave it there. They're not always amenable to this idea because their medical training doesn't allow for this openness. And that's okay, but there is a way to still advocate for yourself. And this is what I really encourage people to do. The last chapter of my book, which I didn't know was going to be in the book until the very end, is how to determine whether your doctor will work with you, how to create a language that allows you to communicate effectively. What are red flags in communication with your doctor? How do you know when it's time to find another one? What does that process look like? And we are really at a point in time where we're creating a language that doesn't exist. Fortunately, we have a lot of emotional depth now in communication that we didn't have even 10 years ago with respect to understanding our own attachment style, nervous system regulation. Verbal Judo is a great book. There are a lot of things that we can do now to educate ourselves so that when we go talk to these educated people, we're able to communicate effectively, not just from an emotional state, but from a logical state as well, and really advocate for what we want.
Nice. And I think, as you said, if that's not in reciprocal opening with the physician, that you may want to find a physician that can be a better communicator or listener and maybe think more expansively. So I love that. I think that's a really high note to wrap up our conversation. We still have a minute or two. Do you have any parting thoughts? Anything you'd like to share to help conclude? Other than what you just said is amazing, but is there anything else you want to bring in before we wrap up?
I just really hope that people understand that we are at a point in time right now where we have more options than ever to really take control over our own health and well-being, over the perspective that we choose, over the way we choose to communicate with others. We are curating our own lives. We are not at risk of or victims of another person's story. You can author your own story. You don't need a co-author any longer. You need people to support you and help you do that, and it is available to you. Beautiful.
That's a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation, Alina. I appreciate it. And I appreciate speaking with you. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I will say to the audience that I will have links for Alina's website and with the book, that you can access the book. So I'll have all of that available in the description field. So Alina, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Now I'll say goodbye to you after I stop the record. So to the YouTube audience, take care. Thank you so much. And Spotify people, thank you so much. I hope this was generative for you. And I'll see you all in the next conversation. So take care until then.